Take your hands off that car. Woman, I know a fake uniform when I see one. Those words, delivered with a hard edge and a deeper contempt he no longer bothered to hide, would become the line that ended Officer Derek Whitaker's 19-year career. They came out sharp, fast, and dripping with judgment as he stepped toward a woman who outranked every officer he had ever met. In 42 seconds, he would take a step that no badge could defend. He drove her chest into the hood, locked her wrists behind her back, and fired a single round that tore through her uniform and her pride. The impact crushed her breath, sent a burning shock through her ribs, and dropped her to the wet asphalt where she lay helpless, humiliated, and bleeding beside the young woman she had stopped to protect. The moment was filmed. The moment became a firestorm. And the moment carved the first scar in a chain that would change 10 lives forever. Before going into this story, tell me where you are watching from. If you want more stories about justice, truth, and accountability, remember to subscribe to the channel and give me a like. It helps the channel grow, and it helps more people hear what really happened on that Virginia highway. Captain Naomi Harper's day began with calm certainty. She wore her service alphas. The captain's bars aligned with the same precision she brought to every duty she had ever taken on. Her leave ended at midnight. By sunrise, she would be back at Quantico preparing for redeployment. She decided to drive toward Manassas for a quiet lunch, the kind that steadies the mind before the next stretch of work. When she noticed a disabled Honda Civic on the shoulder, she slowed without hesitation. A college student stood beside a shredded tire, frantic and unsure, her hands trembling as cars roared past. Naomi guided her toward safety with steady authority. She knelt without a complaint, loosened the lug nuts, and kept her tone calm enough to settle the young woman's nerves. Her presence eased panic. Her uniform stood as reassurance. Her voice carried the experience of someone who had seen war and still believed in help. Ava Reynolds, 21, tried to apologize for delaying her. Naomi told her there was nothing to apologize for. "Every Marine helps where they can," she said. "Today I'm the one who stopped, so today I help you." She stood to stretch her back after tightening the jack. Rain misted the edge of the highway, soft enough to blur the horizon, but not soft enough to erase the growing unease she sensed from Ava's eyes. Naomi followed the direction of that fear and saw a Crown Vic coming to a hard stop behind her Bronco. No emergency lights, no siren, no warning, only the unmistakable posture of a man who approached with judgment already carved into his stride. Officer Derek Whitaker stepped out with his hand resting on his holstered Glock. He did not look at the shredded tire. He did not look at the stranded student. He looked only at Naomi, a black woman in uniform. His expression tightened with suspicion before he even spoke. Naomi raised both palms and addressed him with calm clarity. "Captain Naomi Harper, United States Marine Corps. This is my personal vehicle. I'm assisting a civilian with a flat tire." She held out her hard card, common access card, and military driver's license. Whitaker glanced for half a second and tossed the cards into the mud as if they held no value. His voice cut through the drizzle. "Step away from the vehicle. Now." Ava's breath caught. Naomi did not raise her voice. She did not move with anger. She did everything the manuals say to do when an officer arrives agitated. She turned her head toward Ava and said, "You're my witness. Stay exactly where you are." That was as far as she got. Whitaker surged forward, grabbed her arm, and slammed her chest first onto the Bronco's hood. The force knocked air from her lungs and sent a spike of pain through her ribs. Metal cuffs locked around her wrists in 4 seconds. Ava's phone was already recording. Rain streaked down Naomi's cheek as she tried to speak, but Whitaker stepped back with his weapon drawn. Her body turned slightly as she tried to ground her footing. The shot erupted without warning. The .40 caliber round hit directly over the eagle. globe, and anchor on her chest, shattered bone, severed the subclavian artery, and exited cleanly through her back. She collapsed without sound, her uniform darkening beneath her as blood mixed with rain and pooled beneath the symbol she had earned through discipline and sacrifice. Ava screamed for help, her voice cracking through the storm of fear as she backed away with the phone still recording. Whitaker gave no command. He gave no warning. He stood breathing hard, weapon extended, as if nothing about the moment required explanation. Naomi lay face down on the asphalt, unable to feel her legs, unable to pull air deep enough to steady her mind. She felt the warmth drain from her body. She heard Ava sobbing. She tasted the metallic tang of blood rising into her throat in those seconds. The Marine who had survived Fallujah, the Marine who had walked wounded comrades to safety, the Marine who had endured mortar fire without breaking, realized she could not move anything below her chest. Her life changed before she could finish the sentence forming in her mind. Ava ran toward the roadway waving her arms, screaming for anyone to stop. Cars slowed, phones raised, witnesses gathered. Some shouted for Whitaker to holster his weapon. Others pulled Ava to the side before she ran into traffic. Naomi fought to stay conscious as her blood pooled into the cracks of the pavement. Her vision flickered, her breath weakened. And with each fading second, her career, her mobility, and her future slipped under the weight of what one man believed in 42 seconds. Whitaker radioed in a call that distorted the truth before the ambulance arrived. Suspect reached for her waistband. He said, Naomi Harper had no weapon. Her hands were cuffed behind her back. Her identification lay in the mud where he had thrown it. But lies often move faster than truth, and for a brief moment. His voice was the only one on record. He stood rigid, rehearsing the official version while Ava sobbed on the shoulder, begging strangers to upload the video if anything happened to her. By the time medics arrived, Naomi's pulse barely registered. They worked in silence, shocked by the uniform and the wound. They kept the cuffs on because protocol told them to. They moved quickly because instinct told them time was slipping away. Naomi felt the tilt of the gurney. She felt the cold air of the ambulance. Then she felt nothing at all. The first scar had been carved. The storm had already begun. Whitaker claimed his body camera malfunctioned, but the missing 38 seconds aligned too perfectly with the moment Naomi Harper was slammed against the hood and shot while her wrists were secured behind her back. He submitted the footage as if it were complete. He signed the incident report as if nothing had been removed. And he delivered the line that would echo through every courtroom and every news broadcast that followed. Suspect reached toward her waistband. That lie became the foundation of the cover, the stone he hoped would bury every truth he had created on that rain-soaked shoulder of Interstate 66. Naomi, bleeding out in the back of the ambulance, arrived at Innova Fair Oaks, still cuffed and still classified as a suspect. Intake staff, guided by incomplete dispatcher notes and a description that called her possible military impersonator, logged her as Jane Doe. Her uniform was cut away. Her chest wound was packed. Her vitals collapsed twice before she reached the trauma suite. No one knew her name. No one knew her rank. No one knew that the woman fighting for her life had worn the Eagle, Globe, and Anchor through deployments that would have broken most people. The hospital moved with urgency, but the confusion left her identified only as a stranger in uniform. Meanwhile, Officer Whitaker stood in the precinct briefing room rewriting history line by line. He told his sergeant she refused commands. He claimed she grabbed for something at her waist. He insisted he feared for his life. The report grew more dramatic with each retelling, framed to justify the single round that shattered her ribs and her future. The union representative arrived early, already preparing the standard defense: officer safety, aggressive suspect, reasonable fear. Whitaker repeated the narrative until it sounded rehearsed. even to him. Across the county, First Lieutenant Marcus Delgado was running a training evolution at Quantico when his Apple Watch vibrated twice. He glanced down, expecting a simple message from Naomi. Instead, he saw a notification no Marine ever expects to see from a fellow officer. Heart rate, 0 BPM. Last recorded location, Fairfax County. His body reacted before his mind did. He left the training field at a sprint, leapt into his vehicle, and tore down Route 28 with a dread that grew heavier with every passing mile. He called her phone again and again. No answer. He called her family. No one had heard from her. He reached the hospital doors breathless, uniform soaked in sweat, and demanded information. Only when he saw the shredded remnants of Naomi's service alphas in a red biohazard bag did the truth hit him with full force. He pushed past 2 nurses and identified her by name, rank, and serial number. The hospital reclassified her immediately, but by then hours of confusion had already passed, and the damage, medical, legal, and moral, was already compounded, 20 miles away. Ava Reynolds sat in her dorm bathroom with her back against the tile floor, shaking uncontrollably with her phone clutched in both hands. Her 28-second recording had already passed 1 million views, then 2, then 4. She had uploaded it in desperation from the side of the road, terrified she would lose it if she kept it only on her device. She never expected what came next. Comments poured in, some outraged, some supportive, some threatening. Her inbox filled with messages from unknown accounts telling her to take the video down. Others demanded that she post longer footage. She cried harder each time her notifications refreshed. She tried to call her father, but her hands shook too badly to dial the number. She sat curled on the tile floor, whispering into the phone. I tried to help her. I didn't know what else to do. By evening, the clip reached 4.2 million views. It dominated news algorithms. It spread across continents. And then, without explanation, it vanished. Every platform flagged it simultaneously for sensitive graphic content, even though countless videos with worse violence had never been removed. Some observers suspected coordinated reporting, others suspected pressure from the department's media office. But on Ava's end, the silence from the platforms felt like erasure. She knew what she saw. She knew what she recorded, and yet the world had been given only hours to witness the truth before it was tucked away behind vague messages about policy violations. Marcus stood outside Naomi's trauma room, gripping the metal railing with white knuckles. A surgeon approached, speaking with the kind of direct calm used only when the news is too heavy for anything less. The bullet had torn through her chest plate, shattered bone, and severed the subclavian artery. They restored circulation, but the damage to her spinal cord was catastrophic. Even if she survived the night, she would never walk again. Marcus closed his eyes for a long moment, fighting the impulse to punch through the drywall beside him. She was helping someone, he said. She was helping a child. The surgeon placed a hand on his arm. She's alive. That's all we can say right now. Back at the precinct, Whitaker sat in a small office, staring at his computer monitor, while an internal affairs investigator typed notes. He insisted again that Naomi had reached for her waistband. He never explained why he didn't activate his cruiser lights. He never explained why her identification was found in the mud. He never explained why she was shot from the front while her wrists were locked behind her back. When the investigator asked about the student witness, he shrugged and said he didn't notice anyone else. He played the role of a man confident in his script, never realizing how quickly it would collapse. That same night, prosecutors in Prince William County received an anonymous email containing the original video file and a message typed in a trembling hand. Please don't let them erase her. The link was copied, forwarded, backed up on cloud drives, and sent to federal contacts. A staffer in the Commonwealth's attorney's office watched the footage in stunned silence, replaying the moment where Naomi turned her head to call to Ava, only to be slammed forward and shot 11 seconds after the cuffs snapped shut. The staffer closed the office door and whispered into the dark room. "This won't stay local." By dawn, federal servers had captured the video. Department of Justice analysts began retrieving metadata. Cyber units began tracing the missing 38 seconds of Whitaker's body cam. Large platforms that had removed the video were quietly served preservation notices within 12 hours of the shooting. The incident had reached senior officials in Washington within 18 hours. The FBI's Richmond field office dispatched a team to Prince William County. The head of the field office did not mince words. "We need every phone, every cruiser, every scrap of data," she told her agents. "No delays, no exceptions." Marcus returned to the hospital waiting room and sat with his elbows on his knees, staring at the floor. Ava arrived 30 minutes later, eyes red and swollen, flanked by a campus security officer who drove her from the university. She approached him cautiously. "I'm sorry," she said. "I didn't know what else to do. She told me to stay where I was. She asked me to be her witness." Marcus lifted his head. His voice came out low but steady. "You did the right thing. You saved her truth." Ava nodded and held her phone to her chest as if it were the last fragile proof of what she had seen. By late afternoon, the story had ignited every major network. Commentators debated whether the shooting was justified, though the footage said otherwise. The union defended Whitaker with predictable familiarity. The department issued a short statement urging patience, but patience cracked under the weight of evidence, and fear spread through the ranks as word leaked that federal investigators were on their way. Naomi lay unconscious in the trauma unit, unaware that the world outside was already shifting around her. She did not know about the vanished video. She did not know about the federal response. She did not know that her name, still not spoken on the evening news, was about to become a national headline. She only knew the quiet drift into darkness while machines worked to keep her alive and while the truth, captured in 28 seconds of courage, began burning its way into the center of the country's conscience. 48 hours after the shooting, the storm began in full force, and nothing Prince William County did could stop it. By sunrise, the Justice Department opened a federal civil rights investigation, the kind reserved for only the most egregious cases. Agents from the FBI's Richmond field office arrived at the county police headquarters with sealed warrants authorizing the seizure of every device, every cruiser dash cam, every phone that touched the case. Officers watched uneasily as federal technicians disconnected servers and copied files. The room smelled of stale coffee and sweat as supervisors whispered among themselves, already sensing that this incident had moved far beyond their control. At the same time, federal cyber teams traced the missing 38 seconds of Whitaker's body cam and found that the gap matched the exact window between the moment he threw Naomi's identification into the mud and the moment he pulled the trigger. That discovery erased any hope of claiming technical failure. A deliberate manual deletion had taken place, and the timestamp matched Whitaker's own movements, and while investigators worked, the rest of the nation erupted. The fact that a woman in full Marine uniform had been shot while acting as a good Samaritan spread through military networks in minutes. Veterans' forums exploded. Active-duty Marines at Quantico held silent formations. The commandant's staff demanded updates from the Department of Justice every hour. No one yet knew her name, but everyone knew the uniform. Inside Innova Fair Oaks. Naomi clung to life on a ventilator. Every hour brought another complication. Her spine had taken too much trauma. Her blood pressure fluctuated wildly. And yet the image replayed across the country was the 28-second video that Ava posted. Then lost. Then had reinstated by platforms forced to comply with federal preservation orders. It returned to the internet like a tidal wave, her body pinned on the hood, her voice steady as she identified herself, her hands wrenched behind her. The shot, the collapse, the pool of rainwater turning red beneath her. Viewers heard Ava's scream echo across the scene. News anchors repeated the line. Captain Naomi Harper, U.S., Marine Corps, shot while handcuffed. The detail that she had been assisting a college student fueled outrage deeper than any single incident in years. Master Sergeant Dolores Harper, retired Army nurse and Naomi's mother, appeared on CNN less than a day after receiving confirmation of her daughter's identity. She sat stiffly in her chair, hands folded, voice steady enough to break hearts. My daughter survived Fallujah. She didn't survive Virginia. The sentence delivered a wound to the conscience of an entire nation. Her words became a chant at protests outside Prince William County Police headquarters. They appeared on signs held by veterans marching through Washington. They echoed through interviews, commentary, and congressional press briefings. Dolores spoke with a quiet force that resonated across generations. She did not plead, she did not accuse, she simply told the truth. Congresswoman Jennifer Wexton, representing Virginia's 10th District, wasted no time demanding federal jurisdiction. In a press conference on the Capitol steps, she declared that local authorities had forfeited their right to manage the investigation. She held a printout of the still frame showing Naomi's hands cuffed behind her back. No one, she said, pausing long enough for the words to settle. No one can pretend this was a threat to officer safety. Her call for immediate federal oversight gained bipartisan support from lawmakers with military backgrounds. Even those who typically avoided speaking on policing controversies acknowledged the severity of what they had seen. Meanwhile, Whitaker remained on paid administrative leave in accordance with departmental policy. The union defended him aggressively, releasing statements insisting that he acted according to training. They framed Naomi as non-compliant, unverified in her claims, and potentially armed. But the statements grew weaker each hour as more evidence emerged. The union president gave a tense interview, reciting legal phrases without conviction, while commenters across the country dismissed his narrative in every corner of the nation. People had already seen what happened, and they had seen it without edits, without commentary, without the protective gloss that departments sometimes use to soften public reaction. Ava Reynolds, the young college student whose video had ignited the storm, found herself thrust into the center of public scrutiny. News vans parked outside her dorm. Students whispered when she walked past. Some thanked her. Others resented the attention. She barely slept. She relived the scene every time she closed her eyes. She watched strangers online pick apart her voice, her presence, her fear. She remained terrified that someone would retaliate. Yet she continued cooperating with investigators, handing over the original file, timestamps, and the metadata that confirmed its authenticity. She became the key civilian witness in a story far larger than anything she ever imagined. At Quantico, Marcus Delgado met with Marine Corps legal officers and command staff. The Marines moved with disciplined urgency. They prepared statements, notified Naomi's unit, and arranged chaplain visits for her closest colleagues. Marcus stood in a quiet hallway listening to a senior colonel say, "We will not let this go." The colonel's expression carried the weight of every service member who had ever been misjudged in uniform. Across the nation, military families responded with raw emotion. Gold Star parents filmed messages of support. Disabled veterans sent donations for Naomi's medical care. Active duty service members recorded short videos in their barracks, saying her name aloud before saluting. The incident awakened a deeply personal anger, an attack on one of their own. Even those outside the military felt it. Parents told their children the story. Pastors mentioned Naomi in sermons. Newspapers published editorials questioning how a Marine captain could be mistaken for an impersonator while literally wearing the stripes, the insignia. and the bearing of someone who had earned her place through sacrifice. At the Justice Department, analysts reviewed deleted body cam segments and discovered multiple manual override attempts, all traceable to Whitaker's device. Technicians reconstructed partial fragments from CloudSync residues. Each new file only deepened the department's resolve. Prosecutors drafted memoranda recommending federal charges. Noting the clear indication of intent to obstruct, meetings escalated to the Attorney General's staff. A federal civil rights complaint began taking shape before Naomi had even regained consciousness. 3 days after the incident, protests filled the streets of Gainesville and Manassas. Veterans marched with service flags. Students marched with signs quoting Dolores Harper. Retired officers marched silently in solidarity in front of Prince William County Police Headquarters. Hundreds knelt for 42 seconds, the exact length of time from Whitaker's arrival to the gunshot. The gesture spread to cities nationwide. Inside the hospital, Naomi remained in critical condition. She showed no signs of waking. Machines breathed for her. Nurses kept her wound clean while updates poured into the family waiting room like a relentless tide. Her mother sat with quiet strength, gripping the same rosary she had carried through Vietnam. Marcus stood beside her, jaw locked, holding his anger in a clenched fist. Whitaker, meanwhile, stayed inside his home under the protection of union attorneys. He avoided public appearances. He avoided the news. He avoided the reality he had created. His voice appeared only once more that week, in a short recorded message released by his lawyer. "I acted in fear for my life." The statement landed with a hollow thud across a nation that had watched the footage. No one believed him, not anymore. By the end of the week, the Justice Department announced that the case would proceed under federal jurisdiction. Prince William County learned that they would not be leading anything, not the investigation, not the review, not the prosecution. Their authority evaporated the moment federal agents stepped through their doors. Naomi Harper lay motionless in her hospital bed, unaware that an entire nation was rallying behind her name, unaware that her life had already sparked legislation drafts, national debates, and a movement that would alter Virginia law forever. She survived Fallujah. She fought for her country. And as she lay in silence, battles she never asked for were already being waged in her name. The federal trial of Officer Derek Whitaker opened in Alexandria with the gravity of a proceeding that everyone in the courtroom already understood would ripple far beyond its walls. A special 3-judge panel, Teresa M. Delgado presiding, retired Marine Colonel Richard L. Hawthorne, and Judge Aisha N. Rahman, took their seats with a solemn weight that settled over the room like a held breath. Whitaker entered in a gray suit that did little to soften the cold, vacant look in his eyes. He walked the aisle with the faint swagger of a man convinced his union, his attorneys, and his practiced script could still save him. But the moment he faced the bench, his confidence flickered. Judge Hawthorne, with the bearing of a man who had commanded Marines in combat, watched him with a gaze that cut through every pretense. The prosecution table held Special Federal Prosecutor Maya E. Caldwell, whose calm composure concealed a steel resolve that had shaped her reputation across multiple civil rights divisions. She opened the government's case with clarity and precision, laying out a timeline that stripped Whitaker's narrative to its bones. She displayed the reconstructed footage, a 4K recovered video stitched together from mirror servers after investigators traced the deleted segments of his body cam. The screen cast a cold light across the courtroom as Naomi Harper appeared, standing with her palms open, her uniform crisp, her voice steady as she identified herself as a Marine captain assisting a civilian. The judges watched Whitaker throw her credentials into the mud. They watched him charge. They watched him wrench her arms behind her back. They watched her body collapse after the shot. The playback left nothing for interpretation. A hush fell so deep that the soft hum of the projector became the loudest sound in the room. Caldwell then presented military black box data recovered from Naomi's vehicle, an unexpected trove of information that proved she was still seatbelted when Whitaker dragged her from her Bronco. The data showed 0 acceleration from her hands, 0 abrupt motions, 0 threats. It dismantled every claim Whitaker had made. A forensic video analyst confirmed that the missing 38 seconds of his body cam were manually deleted, not corrupted, with the deletion aligning to the precise moment between Naomi's identification and the gunshot. Every expert who took the stand strengthened the federal case. A use-of-force instructor testified that nothing in the footage aligned with officer safety protocols. A medical trauma expert explained the angle of entry, proving Naomi was unable to pose a threat with her hands cuffed behind her back. Caldwell moved with the rhythm of someone who understood that each simple, clear sentence hit harder than any emotional flourish ever could. She built the case brick by brick until the narrative stood impenetrable. When Naomi's uniform was entered into evidence, the room stiffened. The eagle, globe, and anchor bore a bullet hole that split its center. The fabric around it remained stained with rainwater and blood. A young Marine corporal escorted the sealed evidence container to the clerk's table. His hands shook slightly, but his posture never faltered. Judge Hawthorne's jaw tightened. He knew what it meant to wear that emblem, and he knew what it meant to violate it. The prosecution displayed Whitaker's personnel file next. 3 prior excessive force complaints, each marked unfounded, each involving black motorists, each dismissed with identical phrasing. The pattern formed a shadow that stretched across his 19-year career. For the first time in the trial, Whitaker's confidence visibly cracked. When Caldwell called Ava Reynolds to the stand, the courtroom softened. The young woman's voice trembled, but she spoke with sincerity. She described the rain, the shredded tire, Naomi's calm instructions, and the sudden violence that followed. She said, "She told me to be her witness. She said it because she knew something was wrong." Her words silenced the room. Naomi's mother wiped a tear with the back of her hand. Marcus Delgado sat in uniform, shoulders square, eyes unblinking, absorbing every second. Ava finished her testimony with a quiet sentence that carried the weight of every young person forced into courage before they were ready. "I tried to save the truth." The defense mounted its case with strained effort. They argued that Whitaker feared an ambush. They referenced officer safety studies. They claimed Naomi made a furtive movement. Though the video disproved it, their expert on stress response faltered under cross-examination when Caldwell asked whether a stress response could explain manual deletion of body cam footage. The expert conceded it could not. Each defense witness weakened Whitaker's position. Each attempt to justify his actions dissolved. Finally, Whitaker took the stand. His voice trembled at the edges. He repeated his story that Naomi reached for her waistband, a line he had repeated so often it had become muscle memory. Judge Hawthorne leaned forward and asked a single question that shattered what remained of the defense. Her hands were cuffed behind her back. "Officer, exactly where was this weapon you feared?" The courtroom froze. Whitaker blinked twice, opened his mouth, and said nothing. That silence hung longer than any answer could have. It broke the illusion of fear. It broke the illusion of threat. And it confirmed what the nation already believed. Closing arguments took less than an hour. Caldwell reminded the jury that a Marine captain acting as a good Samaritan had been shot while handcuffed. She reminded them that the video existed because a 21-year-old student had the presence of mind to record it. She reminded them that the deletion of body cam footage showed intent, not panic. Her voice remained steady as she finished. This case is not about fear. It is about power abused and truth erased. Captain Harper's life was nearly ended. Officer Whitaker's decisions must now be judged. The jury deliberated for 4 hours and 12 minutes. When they returned, the courtroom rose in near-silent unison. The foreperson, a retired Air Force sergeant, read the verdict, guilty on all counts, attempted murder of a federal officer, deprivation of rights under color of law, obstruction of justice. Whitaker stared at the table, breathing shallowly, his uniformed past collapsing beneath the judgment now placed upon him. Sentencing followed weeks later. Judge Delgado read the order with the unwavering tone of someone delivering irreversible consequence. 28 years in federal prison, no possibility of parole, total pension forfeiture, lifetime firearms prohibition. Whitaker's knees buckled as the marshal secured the cuffs. The courtroom exhaled slowly, as if the nation had been holding its breath since the day of the shooting. Marcus Delgado closed his eyes in controlled relief. Dolores Harper bowed her head in quiet grief and pride. Prosecutor Caldwell watched without triumph, only resolve. The judges left the bench knowing their ruling would define legal precedent for years to come. And outside the courthouse, crowds gathered with signs, salutes, and silent tears as news of the verdict spread. The truth had been spoken with clarity. Justice had been carried out with dignity. The storm had reached its peak, and the consequences had only begun. The fallout began the same hour the verdict was read, spreading through Virginia with a force that shattered everything Prince William County believed it could contain. The settlement came first. County attorneys, after reviewing the evidence, the body cam deletions, and the projected damages of a federal civil rights suit they knew they would lose, urged the Board of Supervisors to settle immediately. The board voted in a closed session that lasted less than 40 minutes. They approved a payment of $21.4 million to the Harper family, publicly described as the largest civil rights payout in Virginia history. Reporters called it unprecedented. Veterans called it overdue. The county treasurer called it catastrophic. Local taxpayers called it a reckoning. The statement read at the news conference acknowledged no wrongdoing, but the size of the settlement spoke with a clarity no official was willing to admit aloud. It was the first institutional admission that the shooting of Captain Naomi Harper had not been a matter of fear, confusion, or misjudgment. It had been a crime. The governor's office moved next. For weeks, protests had filled the streets of Manassas, Gainesville, Arlington, Alexandria, and Richmond. Veterans marched in formation. Students marched in silence. Mothers marched with handwritten signs bearing Naomi's name. Under growing pressure, Governor Ellison announced he would sign sweeping legislation known as Naomi's Law, a bill that would transform the way police departments across the state handled body-worn camera footage. The law required all police body cameras to upload footage in real time to an independent statewide cloud system that officers could not access, manipulate, or delete. It established automatic alerts when footage stopped recording for more than 2 seconds. It banned local departments from storing or editing recordings. It required all use of force incidents to be transferred to federal review within 24 hours. Departments across the state bristled at the changes, calling them overreach. But the governor spoke plainly at the signing ceremony. A Marine captain was nearly killed because of a gap in a camera and a lie in a report. That gap closes today. The applause from military families alone drowned out the objections. The Virginia Police Union faced the next wave of consequence. The U.S. Justice Department filed a $187 million pattern and practice lawsuit against the statewide union for shielding officers with repeated misconduct complaints, obstructing investigations, and pressuring local departments to ignore excessive force reports. Evidence collected during the federal investigation revealed systemic delays, coordinated defenses, and internal memos instructing members to preemptively reinforce officer fear. The lawsuit struck like lightning across the law enforcement community. Union leaders called it politically motivated, but whistleblowers emerged from within, confirming the worst allegations. Depositions revealed that Whitaker's 3 prior excessive force complaints, which had all been dismissed as unfounded, had been quietly suppressed through a union-driven strategy of overwhelming complainants with legal demands they could not meet. Those revelations broke public trust in a way no settlement or trial could repair. United States Penitentiary Lee, the federal penitentiary tucked deep into the Appalachian Mountains, became the final stage of Whitaker's downfall. He arrived in shackles, escorted by marshals, his sentence freshly imposed and his reputation in ruins. Prison staff had already watched the trial. Inmates had already discussed the video. The man who once carried a badge entered a world where badges meant nothing. For his own safety, he was placed in protective housing, but whispers spread quickly. 3 months into his sentence, he became the target of an assault in the recreation yard, an attack executed in a blur of fists, metal, and rage. Cameras captured only fragments. Officers responded too late. Whitaker was found unconscious, breathing but unresponsive. The medical assessment at the prison hospital confirmed a traumatic brain injury that left him in a persistent vegetative state. He would never walk again, never speak again, never stand trial for the assault he suffered behind bars. Federal officials issued a short statement acknowledging the incident. The union released no comment, the county offered none, and the public expressed little sympathy. But the fallout extended far beyond Whitaker's fate. Prince William County's budget unraveled, departments froze hiring, infrastructure projects stalled, libraries and after-school programs lost funding. Residents who had never attended a public meeting now filled auditoriums demanding answers. Young officers quietly resigned. Senior officials retired early. The county police chief faced calls for dismissal. Federal monitors arrived to oversee department restructuring. Internal reviews unearthed years of training deficiencies. The department was placed under a consent decree requiring 9 years of federal oversight. Every reform felt like an attempt to rebuild a reputation shattered by 42 seconds of violence. Meanwhile, Naomi's image appeared at vigils across the nation. Marines from Quantico stood at attention as candles flickered around photos of her in her service alphas. Her face calm and resolute. Her mother Dolores attended some gatherings, sitting quietly in the front row with her rosary wound through her fingers. Marcus Delgado spoke at others, delivering measured words that balanced discipline with grief. She lived with purpose, he told a crowd in Arlington. She served with honor, and she deserved better from the state she protected. Each vigil felt like both mourning and proclamation. Ava Reynolds, overwhelmed by the pressure of being the accidental witness whose recording ignited the national response, withdrew from her university for the semester. She attended therapy, she avoided social media, but she remained committed to telling the truth. She provided testimony for congressional subcommittees reviewing federal police powers. In one meeting, she repeated the words Naomi had spoken to her moments before the shot. "You're my witness." Those words became a rallying cry for a generation of young activists, students, and veterans who demanded accountability at every level of law enforcement. Congresswoman Jennifer Wexton faced fierce political backlash. Her opponents branded her anti-police, federal pawn, and enemy of law enforcement. Attack ads looped her press conference speech with ominous music. Her district, traditionally moderate, turned sharply against her. She lost her next election by 6 points. In her concession speech, she said only, "If choosing justice costs me this seat, then I leave with a clear conscience." The medical bills for Naomi's continuous care soared. The settlement covered what it could, but the emotional cost far outweighed the financial one. She remained unconscious, caught in the quiet dimness between life and awareness. Doctors monitored her relentlessly, balancing hope with realism. Her prognosis remained unchanged, permanent paralysis from the chest down. Marcus visited daily, reading to her in soft tones, updating her on the world outside, and promising that he would stay until she opened her eyes again. The storm that followed the shooting reached into every institution it touched: policing, politics, law, media, the military, families, and communities. Consequences fell hard and deep, reshaping laws, exposing failures, and revealing truths that many wished had stayed hidden. Prince William County felt the cost of silence. The Union felt the cost of protection. Whitaker felt the cost of his choices. And the Commonwealth of Virginia carried the weight of a tragedy it could never fully undo. The bullet that shattered Naomi's spine had fired only once, yet its impact spread through every corner of the state. The legal fallout, the political fallout, the moral fallout, all of it carved into the lives of thousands. And though the courts had spoken, and the reforms had begun, the deepest battle, the personal one, waited quietly for the moment Naomi Harper would awaken. 11 months after the shooting, inside a quiet rehabilitation wing of the VA complex, Captain Naomi Harper opened her eyes for the first time since the bullet shattered her spine. The moment was not dramatic. No beeping alarms, no sudden rush of doctors, just a slow blink, a soft exhale, and the subtle awareness that the ceiling above her was unfamiliar and impossibly far away. A nurse noticed first. She whispered her name gently, as though afraid to disturb the delicate peace that hovered over the room. Naomi did not speak. Her eyes drifted across the space, stopping on the window, then the doorway, then the wheelchair stationed quietly against the wall. She tried to breathe deeper, but her chest tightened with a quiet, sharp pain that reminded her of everything she had lost. She tried to move her hand but felt nothing below the upper ribs. The truth reached her all at once, not through panic, but through a steady, crushing clarity. She had survived, but the life she knew had been taken from her. In that moment, she understood what the doctors had prepared her family for: permanence. Dolores Harper entered the room minutes later, rosary in hand, and froze when she saw her daughter awake. She whispered a trembling, "Thank God," and rushed to the bedside, her tears falling silently, reverently, as she held Naomi's hand with both of her own. Marcus Delgado stood in the doorway, uniform immaculate, shoulders squared, holding himself together with the discipline of a Marine who had learned to mask his grief behind a quiet resolve. He stepped forward slowly, nodding once as Naomi looked at him, recognition returning like a soft glow. He spoke her name the way someone speaks a prayer. "You're back," he said, his voice breaking just once. She tried to answer, but her throat held only a dry rasp. A nurse moistened her lips, reassured her, and told her she would regain her voice soon. Naomi gave the faintest nod, but her eyes carried the weight of 11 months of darkness and the first glimpse of a future she had not asked for. In the days that followed, she remained quiet as specialists explained the full extent of her paralysis. She listened without flinching, absorbing the information with the same discipline she once applied to operational briefings. She learned that her spinal cord had been severed beyond surgical repair. She learned that sensation would never return below the mid-chest. She learned that she would rely on a wheelchair for life. The physicians spoke gently, but the truth needed no softness. Naomi faced it with a steady gaze that unnerved even her medical team. She did not cry. She did not break. She simply listened. When Dolores whispered, "Baby, you can take your time." Naomi closed her eyes for a long moment and breathed out slowly, letting grief settle in a place she would examine later. She would allow herself pain, but not collapse. Public reaction to her awakening spread across the nation with the speed of a breaking storm. Military networks lit up with messages. Veterans left comments on official channels expressing gratitude and sorrow. Advocacy groups posted statements of support, but the most significant reaction came from Congress. A scheduled police reform hearing, originally planned to review body camera compliance across federal jurisdictions, was altered within hours to include an address from Captain Harper, if she chose to give one. Naomi listened to the invitation in silence, her eyes fixed on the window. For a long time, she said nothing. Then, finally, she spoke 4 words, her voice fragile but firmly shaped. "I need to stand." The irony was not lost on her. She could not stand physically, but she could stand in truth, and standing in truth would be the only form of justice she could still control. Marine Judge Advocate Lieutenant Colonel Emily Zhao visited her next. She spoke with the respect of an officer addressing another officer wounded in service. She explained the legal implications of her words. She reminded Naomi that anything she said would shape federal legislation for decades. Naomi listened, her gaze steady, absorbing every nuance. When Zhao asked if she wanted assistance drafting a statement, Naomi replied with a soft but unmistakable certainty. "No, I know what I need to say." 2 weeks later, after exercise therapy that left her exhausted and trembling, Naomi sat in her wheelchair before a camera mounted on a simple tripod. The room was quiet. Her hair was pulled back. Her breathing was slow but controlled. Marcus stood behind the camera in dress blues, shoulders rigid. Dolores watched from a corner chair, her rosary clutched in trembling hands. Naomi looked slightly off camera, as though she were addressing a single person rather than a nation. She began speaking with a calm, deliberate cadence that carried the full emotional weight of a woman forever marked by violence. "I forgive Derek Whitaker, the man," she said, her voice steady as the sentence hung in the stillness. Her expression hardened with the next breath. "I do not forgive the system that taught him he could." The line delivered a blow stronger than any outcry. It was the quiet truth of someone who understood both discipline and injustice, both service and betrayal. There was no anger in her tone, no bitterness, only clarity and sorrow and a moral force that resonated deeper than rage ever could. The 42-second video, which matched the exact duration of the encounter that changed her life, was sent directly to the Congressional Committee, then released to the public. It played on news broadcasts across the country. It played in military installations overseas. It played in legislatures debating police oversight. Viewers heard not only her words, but the composure behind them. The composure of an officer who had served her country honorably, but had been nearly destroyed by the institutions sworn to protect her. Senators repeated her quote on the Senate floor. Representatives cited her message during hearings. Civil rights organizations adopted her sentence as a mantra for reform. Veterans groups held gatherings where they played the video aloud before observing 42 seconds of silence. Her refusal to appear in person at the hearing only amplified the video's power. She told no reporters why she declined interviews. She declined every medal offered by military institutions eager to honor her. She refused invitations to public ceremonies. She accepted only permanent disability pay and insisted that no award could give meaning to what had been taken from her. She made clear that the only reason she spoke was to prevent the system from burying the truth behind her suffering in the quiet days that followed. Naomi spent long hours alone in her room, watching light shift across the floor. She asked Marcus to bring her books, classics she loved, military memoirs she once admired, novels she never had time to read. He placed them on a shelf within arm's reach, though she could not reach them without assistance. She asked nurses to set a book in her lap each morning. She stared at the pages for long stretches, absorbing the stillness. For the first time in her adult life, she had nowhere to be. No mission waiting, no orders to follow. Her life had slowed to the rhythm of rehabilitation and reflection. Outside her room, The political world continued to surge. Legislation inspired by her words advanced rapidly. Police departments braced for deeper federal scrutiny. Advocacy groups rallied behind Naomi's law as a national model. Her video became a symbol, a reminder that forgiveness offered to an individual did not erase the responsibility of a system to reckon with its own failures. Yet, inside her room, Naomi kept her world small. She worked with therapists daily. She learned to maneuver her wheelchair with precision. She learned new breathing techniques to compensate for damaged musculature. She learned the language of endurance in a body forever altered. She carried the weight of her new reality with quiet strength. The silence after the storm was not peaceful. It was contemplative, heavy, and often painful. But in that silence, Naomi began to build the foundation for the life she had been left with. One deliberate breath at a time, one bullet, fired in 42 seconds of prejudice and panic, carved 10 irreversible scars that would shape the rest of 10 human lives. Captain Naomi Harper lived, but lived within a body permanently altered. She returned to the world in a wheelchair, spine severed, strength contained in the upper half of her frame. Yet her voice carried the same clarity that once commanded Marines in the field. She became an occasional guest lecturer at Annapolis, speaking not of heroism but of responsibility, reminding young officers that rank meant nothing if conscience failed. She refused medals, interviews, and praise. She lived quietly, reading, teaching, and moving through each day with the controlled endurance of someone who had survived both war and betrayal. Her life continued, but it continued in a way no one could have imagined before that rainy afternoon on Interstate 66. Derek Whitaker's life ended without technically ending, 9 months into his sentence, after the assault in United States Penitentiary Lee. He slipped into a persistent vegetative state. His body remained alive, but the man inside no longer existed. He spent his days in a prison medical wing, fed through a tube, breathing without awareness, his eyes half open, fixed on nothing. The badge he once used as a shield became a memory others tried to forget. His family rarely visited, his union issued no statement, and the public moved on, acknowledging only that justice had run its course in a way fate sometimes chooses, harsh and irreversible. For Ava Reynolds, the young college student who filmed the shooting, the aftermath became a silent burden no one could fully see. The threats, the pressure, the fear of being targeted, the endless analysis of her voice on the recording, all of it grew heavy enough to break a heart still learning who it wanted to be, despite therapy, support, and moments of strength. The weight never left her. She died by suicide years later, leaving behind a note that mentioned only one line: "I hope the truth was enough." Her death became the third scar, the quiet, devastating consequence of witnessing something no young person should ever see. Marcus Delgado resigned his commission 2 months after Naomi awoke. He could not reconcile the discipline he loved with the rage he carried. He founded the Harper Fund, a non-profit offering scholarships, legal aid, and rehabilitation support for servicewomen injured or targeted in acts of violence on American soil. He ran it with the precision of a Marine and the tenderness of a friend who never stopped showing up. Every year, he visited Naomi on the anniversary of the shooting. He never let her forget that she was still a leader, still a force, still seen. Judges Delgado, Hawthorne, and Rahman, the 3 federal judges who presided over the case, found their lives altered as well. For years they lived under federal protection, receiving threats from extremist groups outraged by the outcome of the trial. Their families adjusted to security escorts, restricted movement, and the chilling reality that delivering justice sometimes invited danger. They did not regret their ruling, but the ruling reshaped their lives. Judge Hawthorne, the retired Marine colonel, remarked once in private, "I have faced fire before, but never for doing the right thing in a courtroom. Prosecutor Maya Caldwell rose sharply in her career. Appointed Deputy Attorney General after the case drew national attention. Her work on Naomi's trial became the foundation of her reform initiatives, expanding federal authority over body camera compliance, use of force reviews, and misconduct tracking. She carried the case with her in every hearing she led. Those who worked with her said she kept a small, framed copy of Naomi's 42-second video transcript on her desk, not as a symbol of victory, but as a reminder of the cost of systemic failure. Congresswoman Jennifer Wexton paid her own price. The intense backlash during her re-election campaign cost her the seat she had held for years. She returned to private life with grace, stating quietly in her farewell speech, "Some losses are worth the truth that created them." She never regretted standing with the Harper family, even when it fractured her political future. And finally, Dolores Harper, Naomi's mother, a retired Army nurse from the Vietnam era, fought her own battle as she watched her daughter rebuild life from a wheelchair. She stood at Naomi's side through every surgery, therapy session, and moment of despair when she died of cancer years later. She left the entire $21.4 million settlement to scholarships for women of color entering military service, ensuring her daughter's suffering became a legacy of opportunity for others. At her funeral, Marines lined the walkway in solemn silence as Naomi sat near the front, holding the rosary her mother had carried through decades of sacrifice. 10 lives, 10 paths forever reshaped. One moment on a Virginia highway echoed through all of them. Captain Naomi Harper once said she forgave the man, but not the system that taught him he could act without consequence. Those words became prophecy. The system changed, inch by inch. Laws strengthened, policies hardened, oversight sharpened, but the scars remained. Quiet, permanent, undeniable. 1 bullet, 10 lives, and not one of them ever returned to what it had been before that rain-streaked afternoon on Interstate 66. Thank you for watching this story. If it moved you, please subscribe, leave a like, and share it so more people can hear the truth.